So, hello everyone. So glad Mark's here, my dear old friend who I saved from certain death.
Yes.
You know, I'm going to milk that forever.
Please do. Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
So, yeah, just a couple of things before we start. For those of us who have auditory processing problems, if you could please keep yourself on mute when you're not asking a question. Uh, all the basics, be sure to take turns, make sure everybody who wants to ask a question can do so. Autistic voices first. We love our allies. We don't ever seem to really have much of a problem with that. So let's get underway. Mark, take it away.
All right. Well, yeah. So I've got some opening remarks. Yeah, and really glad to be here. And yeah, glad for the opportunity. So I'm still getting comfortable with the experience of sharing myself or sharing it all in a presentation style setting. Those of you who've been with me before and know me know that. Immediately upon signing up to do it again, and this is maybe with even more vulnerability because it's a personal story. Um, and I in this case, I want the personal story to precede and move beyond my professional practice and identity. Um, I thought, to quote recently self-disclosed autistic David Byrne of the Talking Heads, and you may say to yourself, "My God, what have I done?" So here I am. And if any of you are interested in his story, the NPR article a couple months ago that was about the Speaking in Tongues film reboot essentially became an article and interview about his autism discovery, and it was concise and brief, and I found it really really sweet. So then I considered how this opportunity might hold more ease for me. Then I thought an interview format would be more conducive to my spontaneity. Then I thought that would be a lot to ask of our hosts. Then I thought, well, I could just provide them with questions. And then at the same time, more or less, when I was thinking this, Dawn sent out some really deep inquiries for the story process, and I was really compelled. Then Julia spoke to the group what I was thinking myself. Julia said that interview questions posed by us for us could benefit this project and serve as yet another way to express and further autistic culture. And then upon spending time formulating some of my own additional questions, I thought that this endeavor, just simply the endeavor of forming questions for ourselves, could even be the origin of some sort of a phenomenological autistic identity interview containing a growing battery of questions provided by us, the autistic subjects ourselves, provided by us, the autistic subjects ourselves, asking and answering our own questions as autistic individuals and reflective gems in the holographic neuroexpansive net of autistic culture and affinity. So that's how I came into this. Ready to go, here goes. And Dawn, I'm ready for any questions that you might have. And I welcome questions from anybody else. Those of you who have met with me before in this format know that I'm wide open to interjections. I kind of like that because it takes the pressure off me to perform and orate. So I'm definitely up for something that's pretty free flowing.
Excellent. I love that idea about us generating questions. I have a number of cultural questions I'm going to interject. Maybe not today, but I'm working on those. I don't multitask well, so I'm going to be doing a lot of this, and I hope to be a worthy interlocutor, Mark. So let's start off with your question. How did you discover your autism consciously for the very first time?
And the key word there, maybe for all of us or most of us, is consciously. That once we discover it, we know that we knew it all along. It was February 2019. It was late in the evening, the last night of my clinical week, and there was some household communication breakdown that I definitely take my fair share of accountability for. I had a meltdown. My adult meltdowns are not particularly dramatic or extreme, but in this case, the meltdown was just get my ass to bed. Okay. The question that came up after that around the repetition here and the patterns that came up from my 11-year-old son at the time, 11-year-old son, regarding the things that just weren't changing. the question that came up, is dad autistic? Is dad autistic? So that was the very first step in my recovery. I woke up the next morning at dawn. I was, slept poorly, pretty overwrought, and then woke up to some links to a couple of articles and a couple of autistic quizzes. Took a look at it. Literally, I read through this and I wept. I wept. And oh, by the way, when I did my other presentation, I asked my son, he's 16 now, I asked his permission to share this part of the story, and he granted that. Okay, I said I wouldn't tell anybody his name or anything about his life. So I have permission to share that from him. I wept, I went back to bed. It was a day off of therapy, and then got up and then it was just rolling. And then I just went through everything, every single psychometric I could get my eyes on, like immediately. Ordered a bunch of books, and just everything, as many of you know, it just started cascading, and it was all there. I started reaching out to people who I knew closely, and almost immediately reached out to a psychologist I knew in the community well enough to trust and feel good about, but we didn't have enough professional overlap for there to be a dual relationship. Told her what was up, scheduled an evaluation, a month later, it was 2 days before my 51st birthday. My birthday present to myself was an autism diagnosis. And then the discovery is ongoing. The discovery doesn't stop.
And could you share some of your initial emotional reaction to that?
Well, I think the weeping was the very first reaction. And I'm trying to think, what did that mean? What was I feeling? Overwhelm, relief. The immediate reaction almost immediately was curiosity, relief. Many of us know that we've always been looking for something. Is it this? Is it this? Is it that? That really fits, but not quite. So overwhelm, humility, curiosity, wonder, and then by day's end, really by noon, it was probably rolling into a very strong, overwhelming feeling of relief, and then curiosity. And by the end of the day, I'd probably already, absorbed the equivalent of a college course in autism, or in my autism, because I'd been working with autistic clients always for years.
And what happened next?
What happened next? Well, moving back, went back to bed, got some sleep. It was my day off with my son. We went to breakfast. There was a trip to Seattle, hanging out, relaxing in Seattle just for a night away. Had a lot of time to do this research, started bringing it in. Texted my one of my cousins on it, texted a friend, texted my brother, sent a photo shot of the AQ10, sent a screenshot. Had a nice run along the waterfront the next morning, and then it was just an ongoing process of for the rest of the weekend, just research, okay, and absorbing it. Oh, and what happened next in my brain, and this was in the other presentation, is how can I be a therapist if I'm autistic? That was my first huge hit of cognitive dissonance. Okay, how can I be a therapist if I'm autistic? I immediately found some great resources on that, and it became crystal clear how, as far as therapy goes, especially once I was able to remove my own blind spots because I was autistic and didn't realize I was autistic, because my relationships with autistic clients who weren't diagnosed were just really good therapeutic relationships, okay, because we were vibing autistically and there was autistic attraction, that actually, that the autism is a huge part of how I do therapy, what brought me to therapy, how I've always done therapy, and understanding that and knowing that through the experiences and the writing of other autistic therapists. Now I can really channel this.
That's great. I I know you so well, and I think it just makes you a good therapist. So it says, who did you tell first? But you said your brother.
Well, actually, I told he was, I think, second or third, but I actually told one of my closest friends, and I just sent the AQ10, probable autism screenshot, and the first response was, "I'm skeptical," which was actually pretty good for me. I've told a lot of you already the reason I got the diagnosis. One of the reasons was for my professional identity, because I thought about how do I disclose, how do I talk about this, and that being private about it or secretive about it would just reinforce the stigma, and that it was really important that on my own time frame that I come out and integrate it into my professional identity. I had no idea what that would look like. I thought I needed to be able to say I had a diagnosis, so when people said, "Well, you don't seem autistic," I could say, "Well, it's official," but pretty much nobody said that, which was actually really was relieving. So yeah, so my one friend said I'm skeptical. I just texted back and said, "Well, I think it's real," and he gave me the space to figure it out. And he's that sort of a really good friend, and that was actually good for me, to do a double check and think about it. And then I texted my cousin and my brother, and they were just really like, "Wow, if you're discovering this, if you're figuring this out, it must be there and it must be real and it must be good."
And who do you remember the first person you told that you did not know, like your first stranger reveal? I think that's interesting.
Oh, that's a great one, Don. And that's the thing, this list of questions, I came up with 25 and I stopped there because it was a round number. But I got my head into that. I was like, there could be hundreds of questions. So I don't think I don't think I can recall telling a stranger. Maybe I haven't told a stranger. I don't know. It seems like it would be easier to tell a stranger than somebody I know, but I'm also fairly reserved in general in my public persona. So I'm going to think on that, but it's become something that I'll say as a matter of course. Well, yeah, I'm autistic.
Yeah,
So I
I'm like the hot sauce commercial. I tell shit to everyone.
don't.
The people at the store, anybody. It's a
So yeah,
lot
maybe I
easier.
have. Well, okay, I'll tell you. I've told many strangers over my websites. Okay,
Interesting.
probably
Yeah.
probably in the 10s and 20s because I don't think I get a lot of traffic. So I haven't told hundreds of strangers over my website. But some 40 or 50 or 30 strangers on my professional psychotherapy website. I started moving it in. I said something about my neurodivergent journey informing my therapy, and it was coded and it was signaled. So if you were looking for it, you'd see it. If you weren't, you wouldn't notice it. My consulting website was just as clear could be. So a lot of strangers that I haven't even met yet.
That's cool. I love this question you have here. If you could choose the very best time of your life to have discovered your autism, when would that be?
I asked that question because I already had an answer. And I recognize that this is probably really autistic, and I'm not going to ramble on this, but I was 27, okay, at loose ends. I'd done a master's degree in environmental studies, and that didn't really yield in a career. And I had some environmental work that was paid well for the time and what I was doing, but it wasn't fulfilling. Saved up enough money, fulfilled a lifelong dream, traveling through northern India and Nepal. Um, Informally studying the culture. I was over for 5 months. You caught every sort of dysentery you can get. Came back, just wiped out. I mean, just wiped out, inspired, still at loose ends. Had gotten a job offer to, I came back to Arizona where I was living, but I had a job offer to work on a fishing boat as an observer up in Alaska. It dawned on me that would just be like going to jail, okay, for me, and getting paid to go to jail. So I decided that wouldn't be in my best interests. Then I'm at loose ends. Came back to a relationship that was unraveling necessarily, probably. And I fell between well, I even had scurvy over there because I was up so far north that you couldn't get fresh citrus. And it wasn't a big deal, but it was just like all of a sudden, my gums are sensitive. It's like, oh, that's scurvy. So I found some supplements. So I came back just wiped out, inspired, drained, malnourished, and fell into a major depressive episode, which was very much a crisis of meaning, okay, along with everything else, and entered a really, really pivotal course of therapy right there. And that's when everything was coming up. And at that point in my life, I could have identified with not just depression and, some depression in my past, and the existential crisis I was in. If I could have understood then that I was autistic, that would have been perfect. That would have been perfect. It would have informed my relationships that came since. It would have motivated a lot of my decision making. I don't think the course of my life would have changed dramatically. And earlier, there are all sorts of pitfalls I think that could have occurred if this had happened earlier. I said something to my brother that, if only I could have been diagnosed at 27. And he said, dude, you couldn't have been because it didn't exist. And I think that's one thing for us who are late diagnosed to remember and just give ourselves, when we have that regret and the if only or it could have been, that Asperger's hit the DSM when I was 25. Okay. For all intents and purposes, it didn't exist. We're a lost generation.
Yeah, that's such a good point. People found that hard to believe when I mentioned that at talks, that I wouldn't have even been able to. Yeah. And I love this question too. How were you expressing your autism before identification? Brilliant.
I was pretty opinionated and could be pretty argumentative. If I was into something, I was really into it. I think there are a lot of quirks, a lot of oddities. Most of the people who came to know me found those endearing enough, thank goodness. Some irascibility. I think also a great deal of curiosity and enthusiasm for little things. Definitely a strong sense of political justice, social justice, very, very meaning oriented, right? I've lightened up on that quite a bit. Okay, I've learned to really enjoy small talk, even with strangers and in public places, because the meaning for me, implicit and inherent in small talk, is some human beings connecting as human beings. Okay, even if the material isn't something that in whoever's idea or mind, is deep or critical.
Yeah, it's almost like it takes up time while something else is happening.
Yeah.
I feel, a way to pass the time when the energy is really being shared, but God bless you, because I can't get there with the small talk. How did you feel felt by others? That's such a great question too.
And I can't, is that question before, after, both?
It's right after how were you expressing your autism before
Okay.
identification?
Yeah, I think that was, how was I feeling felt, or how were we feeling felt before we knew we were autistic? Probably all of us had a few people in our lives who, even if they didn't know how they were seeing us, or what they were seeing on us, really saw us. And I can look back and I could see little gestures and things that that I got in my family, that I got from from teachers or mentors and people who seemed to understand. And a lot of times they were people who were also autistic and didn't know they were autistic. But just little things, little things that just ease a person's day or a life, or ways in which somebody gives you permission to take care of yourself, or notices that this is something that's gonna make you feel better. I think certainly people who were able to join in and share my enthusiasm for the things I was passionate about.
That's a huge one. And of course, conversely, how you were dismissed and rejected by other people.
That's a long list. I prefer not to spend a lot of time on that. And it was almost always very subtle. Just that very subtle sense of they don't get this, or do they get this, or how do I help them to get this? I had enough street smarts somehow. I had an evaluation, an educational evaluation when I was in 5th grade, and the psychologist who did it, really sweet guy and a family friend. He came back to my parents. He said, "I don't know how this happened, but Mark tested really high on street smarts." Okay, and he said, "Yeah," he said, "I don't know how this kid, born and raised in South Central Kansas in a small town, I don't know how this kid came up with all these street smarts, but I had enough street smarts to avoid too much bullying." But the bullying was there. The rejection. My 5th grade teacher was a full-fledged, mean-spirited, miserable, I'm sure. Bully. I made it through Boy Scouts. Okay. I'm a former Eagle Scout. I sent all my shit back when they publicly rejected gays. So I'm a former Eagle Scout. I made it through the Boy Scouts of America and retired at 14. Looking back, a lot of it, we look back and we realize that we were being rejected in ways that we didn't even know we were being rejected. And maybe that's a blessing that we were able to just kind of slide through some of it.
Yes.
But you
Yeah,
put the
that was a whole other
together.
discussion we were having with about a few days ago about how autism can actually save your life in trauma.
Yeah.
People would think it would be the opposite, but so many people dear to me have lived because they keep that diamond spark in there. It's phenomenal.
And I feel
This
like
is
I was pretty lucky. I mean, I was just pretty lucky to not get the worst of it and to be able to move through and drift through and adapt and mask and camouflage. And one thing that benefited me, and you see this when people talk about non-stereotypical autism, and I've seen this with clients who it takes them longer to figure it out. My special interests were not out of the ordinary for boys, where I grew up. So you got a boy who's really into baseball or really into music. That those spectral interests were mainstream enough that I was just a kid who was really into stuff.
This is such a big question. I don't know how you would wrap yourself around it, but what is your pre-discovery trauma?
I think it comes down to, I mean, I can bring it down to one thought. Not feeling felt, or not feeling felt enough. Not
Yeah.
feeling felt enough. And there were definitely moments where, where I felt. I hope all of us have some of those moments. And one of the things that I've learned working with trauma is that when you integrate the traumatic experiences that we've necessarily suppressed to get to the point where, where our safety is clear enough and secure enough that we can, whether we want to or not, feel the old stuff, that when the old trauma falls into place and is more integrated across the lifespan, when we can bring that 6-year-old or that 10-year-old or that 14-year-old up into the care of our true selves, our adult selves, our integrating selves, that the good things that happen, the pleasant memories, they rise up. Okay, they emerge. We hadn't even remembered that. Okay, or we remember it differently, and then they stand alone. Okay, that those stand alone because they're no longer always tied to whatever sadness or trauma was surrounding it. So I think, yeah, the trauma, and it wasn't always, but not feeling felt.
Yeah. I mean, as an anthropologist, you know that that can kill people. Clan death,
Yeah.
being invisible, can actually make people die. it has physical ramifications. Who are your autistic ancestors and family members?
Oh, that's a great one. I mean, I asked the question, so I'll take credit for that, but it's a great one. It's a great one for all of us. And I asked that question because I've got them and I had no idea. I have them and I have no idea. And almost immediately it was my dear, sweet grandpa. Okay. My dear sweet grandpa. Everything about grandpa that was grandpa. Okay, the sensitivity, the tenderness, okay, some of the rigidity was autistic. Okay, the struggles he had, the things that we'd tried to figure out or that we didn't understand about his past, that that the gaps that didn't get filled in, the trauma that we, the relational developmental trauma that we really, we got the tip of the iceberg. Okay, my dad, my uncle, my brother, my cousins, that it was all there. And I look back, he died when I was in my early 20s, but I look back on my early years with him, and we'd visit. They moved out of Kansas in the early 60s. He was essentially a sharecropper, but he was a farmer. They moved out of Kansas in the early 60s because his asthma got so bad they needed to get somewhere dry. So they moved to Arizona, to Glendale, Phoenix suburb. At the time, it was not a suburb. It was just another town of Phoenix. And so we'd go out there every year or two as a kid. And I remember driving around in his truck, riding shotgun in his work truck, when I was like little, like 8, 6, 8. And we didn't really talk much. We didn't talk much. He'd share some stories, and I'd want to listen to the radio, and he'd say, well, how about we just watch the scenery? And it was just the most relaxing, comfortable thing that I could imagine. And so I have these memories of him, where absolutely. And I've talked to my brother about this, and my cousins. So Grandpa Dooley. My mom was autistic, and I didn't really get that until I started looking into how autism presents with, more likely with females or assigned females, and very, very clear, and all the things again that we just didn't understand about mom, the anxiety or the behavior that indicated trauma, that we just really, were clear that this trauma didn't exist in her childhood. I mean, I could just go down the list. And again, my brother, is right there with me. So my mom, and then affectionately, my great uncle, affectionately known as Weird Uncle, based on all the stories that everybody told about Weird Uncle, down in Oklahoma. This was on my mom's side. Weird Uncle may very well have been autistic, and from the biscuits that he didn't want to eat because of the texture that he would stick under the kitchen table at Sunday dinner, and of course his dad discovered those biscuits, and guess what Uncle had to do? Eat them.
Oh,
That's the lore, right? You're gonna eat. Your mom worked hard to make those biscuits. You're gonna eat every one of those biscuits. So, I was the second member of my family. This was my first presidential election. Would have been 86. Okay. My first presidential election that I could vote. Nobody is ever mistaking me for a right-wing conservative. I'm not hung up on politics, for these purposes. I found out when I declared my voting preference, on the tail end of the Reagan years, that I was the first and only member of my family to vote Democrat since Weird Uncle.
yay.
Yeah, so I think my great uncle was autistic as well. And of course, then, if Grandpa was autistic and was autistic, it's on both sides of the family tree.
Yeah, many of us could probably struggle to identify an allistic relative, frankly. How have your gender, culture, and ethnicity impacted your autistic identity?
Well, I mentioned I grew up in South Central Kansas, and it's a very it's a little more laid back. Well, people like to tell us we're from the South, or that we're a Southern state, and people from Kansas make it really, really, really clear that we are not a Southern state. Okay, that Kansas was with the Union, that we were right on the line. Okay, so people from Kansas make it really clear that we are not the South. We're not a Southern state, but it's still a little bit that culture, pretty conservative, pretty fundamental, pretty gender stereotyped. I think ultimately it was a pretty kind place and a pretty soft place to grow up autistic, because there, I mean, it's an agricultural communities originally, okay, and that there were cities. I think, well, Connecticut, y'all. I think growing up in Connecticut might have been a lot more stressful. Okay, if we're talking places, where people go to finishing school and learn manners, and there's a lot more. I'm not trying to stereotype the Northeast, but you just don't see this where I grew up, or you didn't see it at that point in time. So I think it was a lot easier just to blend in and be awkward and kind of unusual as a cisgendered boy growing up in Kansas. I took the Bain gender inventory my freshman year of college, and that was revelatory. It's not gender identity, it's not gender orientation. I believe the measure still stands if you look at it very, very specifically for what it measures: gender identity based on the constructs that our society has determined for gender. I came out 50-50 androgynous. And so that was interesting, the degree to which I was able to blend in, being a kid who ultimately would rather go to a library than a sporting event. Okay. Or read a book than go ride a dirt bike, or whatever these questions were. I took it again 3 or 4 years ago just for fun, and I came out just a little bit more on the feminine side, which what I think that says about, I don't think that says that I'm changing or evolving. I think what it says is that I'm giving myself more freedom and more permission, okay, than I was able to give myself growing up when and where I grew up. And there's more room to express that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You may have already answered this, but what clues of your autism were missed?
The anxiety, the confusion. I think the things that I was compensating for, the compensation, and this is once again the doubly or triply exceptional autistic children. I'm triply exceptional for sake of an undiagnosed math disorder. Okay, and I went to high school in the era when all you needed was 2 credits of math, and if you were going for a BA, you were fine. So I stopped at geometry, and I was able to skate by. So I think what was missed was a clear understanding of why this kid's anxious. Okay, why this kid has obsessive thoughts. There's a story, and it's a sweet story. I love to run, and I'm a runner, but I hated soccer. And every kid, goes through a year or two of soccer. That's just what you do. And I hated soccer because it was running and stopping, running and stopping, running and stopping. And I remember my dad said something. I think I overheard it or whatever. And I was like 6, 7. And he said, somebody said, "Oh, which kid out there is yours?" He said, "Which one's yours?" He said, "Oh, the kid who keeps stopping to pull his socks up." The kid who keeps stopping to pull his socks up. I know now why I was pulling my socks up. It was sensory. Okay, you had to wear these striped tube socks, and they have to fit up over your calf. Okay, it was a sensory thing, and I couldn't stop and start and run and stop and do all that. My socks were bugging me. If I'd had ankle socks, I would have been fine. So yeah, so I was the kid who you could identify because he kept pulling his socks up and down, and up and down, up and down.
Oh my God, tube socks, the bane of my existence.
Yeah, yeah.
I would actually just walk around holding them up.
Well, yeah, and you wear them and wash them 3 times, and they're shot.
Oh, Yeah. What in your in utero and birth experiences might have activated autism genes?
This is, and this is something I've learned to ask, with clients and people I know personally, um, about the birth experience. And I knew about my birth story from a very, very early age, maybe too early, really. But it was a part of the family lore. And I was the first of two. The story with my mom and the boys, she had just an easy, comfortable pregnancy with me, and labor was hell. Um, the pregnancy with my brother was miserable, and he just popped right out. Okay, to use her language. So I don't know how that does that. That's random. I didn't do that on purpose. That thumbs up thing, I can't figure it out. So um, that so I was and I went and came back and like, what really happened back then, or what does this mean? And so I was transverse, which is crosswise. Okay, it was a 24-hour labor. I was transverse, crosswise, um, oxygen loss, along with birth trauma. My understanding is that can contribute to activating the autism genes. I've got 3 or 4 of them. I did my ancestry.com and got the whole Promethease printout and went over my DNA, pre-diagnosis, pre-discovery. Oh, there's 4 autistic genes. That's interesting. Um, so um, talking to my mom. My dad can't offer anything at all because he was of the era where he had to stay out in the waiting room, and so he's out there pacing for 24 hours. I think he went and bought a teddy bear and came back. I've still got the teddy bear. And so they called him in when it was all said and done. But a transverse birth, undoubtedly there was oxygen loss, absolute birth trauma. Here's what the OB-GYN said to my dad when he came in. Okay, if you can imagine. The OB gynecologist said to my dad, he said, well, okay, if you'd all been out on the wagon trail, Tom, you'd be burying them both right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a whole discussion about bedside manner there, but
Yeah.
God.
And I
Um,
think in looking at our own stories and inquiring about other people's stories, listening to other people's stories, those of us who may be working with folks personally or professionally who are discovering autism, I found that a really nice point of inquiry. If somebody doesn't have birth trauma or doesn't have something physically traumatic earlier in their life, that that could be associated with autistic expression, it's really important to make it clear that it doesn't require that, but I think it can just add to the picture and really add to the understanding and the validity of the fact that we are this way, and we came by it naturally, genetically, um, and then also environmentally, perhaps.
yeah, and conception trauma, which is something
Yeah,
people don't talk much about, but that's certainly
yeah.
the case with many people I know, and myself, I would say is fair.
Well, and then
Um,
conception trauma, and then the trauma that the mother carries from the conception trauma, and the epigenetics of all this.
yeah, so much to discover. We haven't even scratched the surface of. What are your mental health comorbidities?
Depression, anxiety, um, little things that could have um, looked like OCD here and there, um, depersonalization, derealization,
Hey, could
and
we just,
upon, oh, go ahead.
oh, I just really quick was going to ask because somebody was interested in the genetic testing, uh, put a comment down in the discussion. Um, so you were talking about getting your genetics tested through ancestry.com? What?
Yeah, and there's 23andMe, and so the ancestry, they give you your all your bloodlines. Okay, so they give you um your ethnicity breakdown, but then you can download a zip file that's the raw data. And if you download it and open it up, it's just pages and pages and pages and pages of 0110000, just pages. But you take that zip file and you can I went through Promethease, and so you can send that to a program that for like 16 bucks or 19 bucks, and it clicks, it's like, you can watch it processing. It takes like 15 minutes. And what they do is they convert that into a wiki doc. And then you've got this document that has every single gene. Okay. And then and nobody should look at this before they're 30, probably. Don't look at it unless you have a basic understanding of genetics, because they give you your red genes and your green genes, and you get something at the top of your list that says, you know, increased rate for type 2 diabetes, whatever. And it's like, 15% increased rate. And it's like, oh no, but then you go back and you realize that the basic level is this, and 15% times point, 1, 2, whatever. And so it can be really scary. It's not that bad. So it gives you your red genes and your green genes, but then you can go in and look for genes. You can like type in any condition and it will show you what's there. You can see how many Neanderthal genes you have, or what's in there like that. So yeah, it's wild. It's really cool. And so I went in there and I got, my readout had my initial readout had a few red, and the autistic genes are red genes.
Oh, that's really?
Yeah, yeah. Or
Well,
at
of
least,
course
yeah, at
they
least last
are.
time I looked. Yeah.
Of course they are. Well, we'll change that. We'll change that.
Well, there is a
Um,
saying that goes red instead. It's sort of against the autism speaks blue. So
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Yeah. Red instead.
and how about your overlapping physical conditions? This one's fascinating for me.
Hypermobility is a huge one. I just learned recently from a client that being able to do this is not normal. Okay. That's not a normal range of motion. I had an orthopedist tell my parents when I was a kid, they said that under no circumstances should you ever let this kid play football, tackle football, because my shoulders are loose. I mean, I was a skinny kid and a small kid, but he told me he's a sitting duck for a serious injury. I had a chiropractor tell me, he referred to me as the human Gumby. I saw him because I got hit by a car as a pedestrian. Everything was fine, just some soft tissue damage. The settlement I got out of that allowed me to pay for the green paint and the furniture for my first office, which I also painted green. So that's the rest of the story. But he called me the human Gumby, and he said the hypermobility essentially saved me from serious injury or hard tissue injury, and that I've learned since that there are these overlapping conditions, that it's not autism, and autism, hypermobility doesn't mean autism and vice versa. But it's about how if I understand it correctly, which I barely understand it, that it's about the nervous system and neural development. Another one that I have, I've got a fast metabolism, temperature regulation. And again, it's really fascinating to start talking to people who are autistic, and inevitably left-handedness. Okay, there's a higher prevalence of being left-handed. But a lot of these things that we just live with that are pretty subtle happen to be genetic overlaps.
Yeah, the prevalence of Ehlers-Danlos, for example,
Yes.
is off the charts.
Yeah. And mine's just a much milder version of that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely on a spectrum. Was asking you, I guess she came in late and had a question, and I missed the very bottom of the question. So if you could put that back up, I will.
And I'm looking, I always forget to try to look at, I forget to look at questions while I'm talking.
Yeah,
I can see it here. It says difficulty connecting today. Let's see here. Oh.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Do you have autistic?
Do you? Yes. Do you or other autists here have autistic siblings? How do you feel the presence or absence of this informs your development?
I want to hear from others, but I'll answer first just because I've got the green circle around my square, the green square on my square. I have a brother. He's not autistic. When I was discovering my autism, he realized that there were some ways in which he might be a little bit. But it doesn't matter that he's not autistic, because he understands. He's my younger brother, but people often thought when we were in our 20s, everybody thought he was my older brother because he was more mature and took on more responsibilities earlier than I did, and was more more emotionally stable and well adjusted. But no, I don't have autistic siblings, but my mostly neurotypical brother is just so supportive and so understanding that it just wipes it all out. And that's one of the things that I really in my professional presence am hoping to help neurotypicals achieve an experience is for all of the autistic attraction and connection and bonding. Somebody who's not autistic, who's empathic and curious and understands, it matters. It doesn't matter. I mean, we need to know each other. But I don't feel like there's anything missing at all because my brother's not autistic, because he understands so well and he's so supportive and he wants to understand. But I want to hear from other people, and I want to hear from other people about any of this.
I'm just gonna skip ahead. If we have a chance to go back, that's cool. But there are a couple of these I really want to be sure we get in. What is your autistic kryptonite, and how may it be neutralized?
I asked these questions on behalf of myself without really thinking about them, and I forgot I asked these questions. I think overwhelm for sure. I think overwhelm is definitely a kryptonite. I neutralize it with focus, okay, and trying to stay calm and soothed. I really tried in my earlier life to be a spontaneous person and an adventurous person, and to be known as a spontaneous person. And I can say that one of my kryptonites is a last minute change in plans. Okay, and my friends know this, and if there's a last minute change in plans, or which is even worse, is the plans are going back and forth and back and forth. We can do this or that or that or that or that or that. My friends know enough to understand that wherever I'm at reading this thread, that I've got smoke coming out my ears. Okay, and somebody will jump in and say, hey, can I give you a ride, or do you need an extra few minutes to adjust? So I think those the drastic changes. How I mitigate that is trying to look ahead and well, one of my mantras that I often employ is I don't know what to expect. And if I can remind myself in certain situations that I don't know what to expect and expect the unexpected, then I'm going to do better. And then having things that I can anchor it with, that I don't know what to expect, but I can count on this or I can count on that, and providing those sorts of things for myself.
Yeah, I do okay with those kinds of things. I realized it's not those things themselves. It's if somebody's trying to control my choice in the face of change,
Yes.
my feelings, forget it. It's not, I just can't do it.
Yeah, that's
Gotta
the
be
sense
able
of
to
being
react.
controlled. Yeah.
Yeah, you've
And
got to be
and
able to have the reactions. Yeah.
and the other side of that is autonomy, and some of us may have, well, and then there's back to PDA, which is appropriately understood as uh, um, I always forget I get them mixed up between the bad one and the appropriate one. But the bad one is pathological demand avoidance. Okay. And ABA works really hard to eliminate that, as opposed to pervasive desire for autonomy. Okay, that's what it really is: pervasive or persistent desire or drive. Okay, pervasive drive or desire for autonomy. And then I think confusion is another source of kryptonite. Okay, if I'll speak for others of us, if we can understand what's happening and why, I think we're going to be able to navigate it. But when I'm confused and I don't understand the logic or why it's happening, okay, and even though there's this bottoms up processing that's all the details first, if there isn't a sense of how this fits together, or if there's that confusion, that's really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your autistic superpowers? I know some people don't like that word, but I I like to use it. What are your superpowers?
Curiosity, focus. This is just one of the nicest things somebody said to me about my work. I was told this is post discovery that my superpower is helping other people discover their superpowers, and so for me that's just one of the greatest things I've ever heard.
Oh my God, that is your superpower. I know that. Like I know
Well,
that in
thanks,
my
Don.
soul from knowing you.
Well, yeah, I was humbled. I was so humbled.
Oh, this is a great one. What is your autistic mission statement?
I don't have that yet. I was thinking about that. I do have a sense of my autistic mission, and I'm given the mission statement time. I decided not to just push something out or rush something out in case you asked me that question. I figure you would. My autistic mission, as I'm understanding it now, is to do everything that I possibly can, professionally, personally, to create just to create more autistic belonging in the world and autistic understanding, and that's what we're doing here. That's what CASY's doing. That I think that's my mission, and I look at that personally. That if I'm in the position to help people understand and discover their autism with with less pain and suffering than a lot of us have had, with more inspiration earlier or at the right time or with more support, witnessing and spending time with people who aren't autistic, and helping them understand it. So I think the mission is just a deeper, greater, growing, not just sense of, but experience of autistic belonging for everybody, for all neurotypes.
Yes, I think some permutation of that answer is so common among autistic people. We want to reduce suffering. We want to inspire compassion on every level. And certainly those coming up behind us, it's a big one. You've certainly done a lot to change the world for that. So thank you. And knowing now what you didn't know then, what is your autistic future? I like the time travel in that.
I think being more myself. It's coming up very clearly in my professional identity, in the ways in which my my work is expanding, and my connections. I mean, this is a huge part of that. Okay, the connectivity, connecting and feeling connected with. But I think really my autistic future is probably just being more and more and more myself, and self-acceptance, and I struggle with self-compassion, but that's probably not a daily practice, but maybe a bi-weekly practice.
Wouldn't it be great if we could just like if I could jump into somebody else's body and see myself through their eyes? I wish all my friends could do that, like see themselves how I see them. I think that would be so neat. I asked another question, and it was a good one. And what was it? Roger, did you catch it? Or do you see it there, Mark?
I'm looking, let's see. Yeah, I've got it. I know you touched on math difficulties, disability earlier. Many autistics are given this diagnosis because we process math in abstracts and holistic, contextual, meaning-driven ways. This is counterintuitive, or at least contrapuntal to how it is taught in schools. This way of understanding and learning rings true to the value of autonomy you speak of. Yeah, that's a really great observation. I don't know if I ever would have been a math genius if it had been taught differently. I might not have hated math if it had been taught differently. And I have a weird relationship with numbers, and some of the things on the autistic test that came up, do you see numbers in patterns or forms, or do you arrange numbers in patterns? Absolutely, which indicates some math ability, even though that math ability isn't there, or is barely there. So I think that's a fantastic question. If math had been taught conceptually or with patterns, or you didn't have to show your work in a very specific way, I at least would have hated it less, or maybe enjoyed it a little bit more. And then I would have been better at it. Great question.
Yeah, I love the concept of math, but I
Yeah.
stumbled right on the first question. The first equation, 1 + 1 = 2. Where in nature is that true? When you decontextualize numbers, they lose their meaning. So I was like, 1 + 1 of what + 1 of what equals 2 of what? Like
Well,
one bale
how
of
many
one bale
adults
of
in your
hay
life,
and
Don? How many adults in your life told you were too smart for your own good?
oh yeah.
Which what that really means is you're asking questions that we can't answer. So be quiet.
Yeah, yeah. Got a lot of that in many forms. Um, okay, so that's about the size of the question list, which I think is pretty perfect. I think you really kind of nailed the length there. So I've been going on. I'd love for other people to jump in and ask questions and grab Mark's ear while he still has a few
And
minutes.
I've got 4 minutes. I bumped my 3 o'clock to 3:10. So I've got 4 minutes. I love that
Okay.
I could just keep going. I wish I could. I love that we could keep going.
Yeah, we will. He'll come back. Maybe you answered everything. Oh, go ahead.
I have a quick question. So, I'm not formally diagnosed. I'm self-diagnosed. The one that I get the most often that hurts is that I'm condescending. Have you heard that one? And what do you think's the tweak? That I could look at.
Yeah, and I look back and I think about my college years and early years, and I heard that and I got that message. Um, that's where self-compassion comes in. Once we understand, and I'm still grappling with this, and then at a certain point I learned to communicate in ways that might not be perceived as condescending, even though I never ever meant to be condescending. I mean, none of us want to be condescending because we know how it feels to be condescended to. So I think we learn to adjust our language. I'd have to think on that, but the fact that you're answering this, asking this question yourself, you've probably already got a sense of it. And but if you know what you think and you know why you think what you think and feel what you feel and you can articulate that, that's controversial in a lot of circles. Okay, and especially it's less controversial for white dudes than it is for other people. Okay, but that right there, that I know how I feel, I know what I think, I've thought about this, and I can articulate it. Okay, that can be experienced as condescending.
Yeah, I think I'm figuring out when it sounds like that and where the words could be changed. But it's so like, who knows where to start because I don't get it.
Yeah, and then that's the masking. And I'm going to quote Jessica Pinode directly from her blog. She's an autistic therapist who's blogged about this on Psychology Today, and so I would never say that somebody said this or say it about somebody, but I'm quoting her because she wrote it, in a public blog, right? So I think it's probably fair to quote it. But she talked about realizing post-adult diagnosis, realizing that I'm not just a bitch. Okay. And I think for me, realizing I'm not just an asshole.
Thank you.
I'm not answering your question, I realize.
No, you are. You absolutely are. Yeah, I get it.
Good. Yeah, it's hard to imagine anybody involved with CASY being condescending to anyone. It's an open door, like you're opening the door when you say, here's what I'm about, here's what I want, here's what I don't want. Now it's your turn. But Mark's
Yeah.
right. People have a very hard time taking that turn because they don't know, like he said, it's often just a case of not being self-aware.
And as much as possible, which is what we're doing here, surrounding ourselves with people who either know that about us and know that it doesn't mean what they think it means or might feel like it means, or people who are the same way. And I've, you know, with the CASY stuff and the communications around that, I've had to continue to remind myself that I don't have to think so much about how, you know, a brief response to a message might be interpreted. Hopefully, yeah, that I don't have to think about myself, and I'm giving everybody else that grace, you know, most of the time, that surrounding ourselves with, you know, with people who we can trust, understand it because they know us, okay, and or because they communicate similarly, just like Dawn said.
Yeah,
And I
I
think
mean,
that gives us more resilience for the rest of the places that we go in our lives.
it does. I've seen people and they've contacted me about the amazing transformations they've felt just being immersed in a culture for the first time in their lives.
Yeah.
And the support is there. The proto culture, I feel like, is just baked in. People don't have to fight about it a lot or discuss it a lot. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And
I
that's
know
and
you
that's
have to
that
go,
business of
Mark.
feeling felt and being understood.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad we can do that for each other.
I've got to run. Thanks,
I know
everybody.
you've got to run. I'll talk to folks after you're gone.
Okay. Well, and one thing I would have liked to get more of is other people's experience of this, and I'll get that by watching your videos and you know, reading everything that I hear about from you all. I can't attend every single one of these stories because my clinical schedule is so full, and I feel
Mhm.
self-conscious about that. But I'm, you know, when these videos come up, I'm going to watch them all, and I'm always available for, you know, for email communication around this stuff. So thanks all of you.
Great, Mark. Thank you so much for coming by.
My pleasure. Appreciate it. Bye.
See you later. So I will put Mark's information, contact information in the on the Facebook page for people if they want to contact him directly. And I hope that this interview style, this is the first time we've done this, makes it easier for people to contemplate sharing their stories themselves. I know some people felt kind of lost about where to start. So you can either write your own questions for yourself, you can write questions or use somebody else's, and we'll get someone to ask you if you want to share. Yeah, just get a hold of me and Roger if you'd like to share. And as always, I say we need all voices, no matter where you come from, what your lived experience is. It's all part of autistic culture, so don't be shy.
Actually,
Okay?
just one more thing, Dawn. I think you had mentioned, in addition to sort of the one-on-one or the one person presenting or speaking, maybe even having like a group discussion where, you know, it's more of like an open question about your journey, you know, so spotlight's not just on one person, but people can almost in real time kind of share and connect, you know, around this important idea, important experiences. I think may also be another option for some people here.
Yeah, thank you, Roger, for reminding me that we want to schedule some of those for people, and we'll just bring some questions. It's almost like coming full circle because that's kind of how we started the ethnography. We'll just do it in a little different style for everybody, so it'll work better. Yeah, I love that. Okay,
Great.
so any last thoughts? Okay, well, thanks for everybody coming and taking time out of your day to be here for Mark and join the discussion. Thanks for all of the text comments and everything. Beautiful, beautiful. And we will see everyone soon.